So on our website, if you go to the parent section, you will find a link to a communications archive. So if you're ever think you've missed an email or you're looking for something important and think we might have sent it out, come here. We've got both a list of fall communications. We've got some information that is sent to all new families, all families at the beginning of the year. So those are there. And then in the fall 25 communications, you'll find a link to returning cadet registration information and new cadet registration information. So this is what we emailed out. It's got the date, and then it's got things to check before you arrive, and then the schedule for the day as well. You'll also find what to bring and how to label cadet items. So this has a link to the packing list, and that's the enrollment supplement packet, and also the laundry labeling instructions. So we know a lot of parents have questions about that, so hopefully that will answer what you need. But that's always a good spot to come to find information. This parent section also has some other helpful links, so feel free to kind of look in this section. The cadet handbook is linked here as well, and a lot of the information that Major Welander is going to go over tonight is found here. So please do feel free to look at this. Our new cadets will be learning this over the next few weeks when they are going through Maroon phase. So it's a very, very helpful resource too. Okay. All right. So I'm going to now turn it over to Major Welander. Just to give you a little bit of background on him, he joined the Academy in 2023 and has been serving as our senior Army instructor, coordinating our JOTC department. He has accepted the role of interim commandant for this year as we continue our search for someone to fill that position permanently. He came to the Academy after a 24-year career in the Army, serving as a battalion logistics officer, battalion operations officer, and division training and plans officer. He also has 18 years of teaching experience, so lots of good experience to draw from. So Major Welander, would you say a few words?
Hey, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. You did get most of my introduction, so that takes care of a lot of my time here too. So another thing I was in the Army too is I was actually a commandant at one of the military schools too. So I have been a commandant before. So like you said, I just retired out of the Army about a year ago. I've got educational experience, I've got military experience, and I was looking for something to do that I felt was worthwhile, that would make a difference, and that's why I came to MMA, because I saw how they worked with the young men that are going there, and I just wanted to be a part of that. So just a little bit about myself there. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, I'm not sure what you're
Apologize.
seeing. From the
Sorry. One
okay.
second. It's not sharing the right screen.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Well, I tell you what, while Jennifer's working on getting that going, I'd like to talk about some of the people that work in my department. And so we have, there we go. So
Okay.
here's the first person I'd like to talk about, Major Doug Wright. So he's one of the deputy commandants. So we have 3 deputy commandants in the commandant's department that are assisting me in working in their different areas. Doug Wright's area is, like it says here, it's residential life. Now, if you think about residential life at a military academy, a boarding school, he's in charge of these young men whenever they're not in class. And so, it's a big responsibility. It's daily life with them. It's everything from when they finish athletics in the evening at 6 o'clock in the evening until when they wake up in the morning. And also, all day Saturday and all day Sunday. So he and his company leadership advisors that work for him and senior company leadership advisors do a fantastic job making sure the cadets are healthy and happy, and that their quality of life there at MMA, is fantastic, and that they enjoy their time there. Let's go to, go to the next slide, please. The next deputy, whoop, back up one. Yeah, there we go. Next deputy commandant is Major Putker, Major James Putker. And so he's the deputy commandant that works with support, security, and transportation. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. We'll start with transportation. So, the cadets, there's a lot of movement and a lot of moving pieces to MMA. And, he's in charge of making sure that the cadets get from the airport to the school, from the school to the airport during furloughs, during, to and from summers, going to sporting events, making sure that we have vehicles and we have drivers, to off-campus activities, including, going to, universities for college classes, and just, there's a lot of transportation requirements. We have nearly a 300-acre back campus. And so even some of the vehicles that go back there. So James does a fantastic job running the transportation department. Now, security is, of course, an important issue, I'm sure, with all of you. In today's society, and you hear about all the things going on at schools, and again, James is there and makes sure that all the buildings secure, that the campus is secure, that you don't have to worry, about your cadet while they're there. And he also provides any number of other things, related to support. He kind of fills in wherever he's needed. Now, the third deputy commandant, I don't have a slide for him because he's on here at the call with us, and I'd like him to introduce himself. So it's Bill Mott. Bill, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, certainly, Wayne. A very good evening to everybody. And if you struggle with the accent, please just raise your hand or buzz me, and I'll slow down a little bit. I'm very thrilled to be on this Zoom call with you. I just want to give you a little bit of background. I've just traveled back from Mexico over the last 24 hours, driving the 1,000 miles to get here for the next load of furniture to get back to Mexico with my good lady wife. So it's been a challenging few weeks. And I've got to be honest with you, I'm absolutely knackered. I'm very tired. But I wanted to be on this call because I want you to know as much about me as I possibly can give you, to know that your sons are going to be safe. Your sons are going to be looked after. Your sons are going to be protected. Your sons are going to be cherished. Your sons are going to be taught all the wonderful things, the arts of being a man. Now, I spent 37 years in the British Army. That's 37. I shaved virtually every day. So when I retired from the British Army, I had a pact with my wife that during the summer, I'm allowed to grow my grizzly Adams. Now, the British Army does allow the wearing of a beard, but I can promise you that at the start of the school year, the beard will be gone and I will be clean shaven. So it's not an apology, but just so you're aware of that with regards to me wearing one at the moment. I've just spent 7 wonderful years at Valley Forge Military Academy and College as the commandant. I feel that there's so many more challenges in my life that I want to experience. And I think this pot of gold in Missouri, in Mexico, is somewhere I want to be. And I cherish the opportunity that's been given to me to be able to come to a new school, to share my experiences with all those wonderful young lads. I can't wait to meet them. I can't wait to be able to have a conversation with them individually, to let them know what I'm like as a man, to let them see me for what I am, so that they can polish themselves wherever they want with regards to how they're going to be as men. And I class that as another challenge, another opportunity for me to get closer to God with regards to me being able to get up without any hesitation when duty calls. So it's wonderful to virtually meet you. When I'm in post, when I start, I promise you with my hand on my heart, if you call me and you want to come in and have a conversation about your son or how he's progressing, how well he's doing, how wonderful he's doing and becoming as a young man, my door will always be open to you. But we just need to make sure we communicate in advance so that when you do come, I know you're coming so that I can be there for you. And on that, I'll shut up now because I'm using all of the hour. But I look forward to meeting you all. And it's a pleasure to be with you. I can't wait to start working in MMA.
Thank you, Bill. He's a great addition to the school, too. I'm glad he's going to be with us. And speaking of communication with him, I'm sure you notice his Oklahoma accent, but you'll get used to it. Okay.
Major Welander, if I can just make 1.2 before we go on. We have parents sometimes ask how to address our faculty and staff. And as you've noticed, we've got some different people, obviously, as a military school with military titles. So we do want to encourage parents to address our faculty and staff as you are comfortable in doing so. So as you get to know them, if you want to use first names, that's fine. If you want to, out of a point of respect, particularly for our military folks, use the military title, then of course that's acceptable as well. All cadets, of course, will be using more formal salutations and the military titles. You should also expect to hear them to be saying, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, no, ma'am, no, sir. So we do appreciate that you help them to uphold that standard and encourage them to show those signs of respect as well.
Thanks, Jennifer. Next person I want to talk about is Kim Russell. So Kim Russell is the executive administrative assistant to the commandant. And so what that means is she does everything. She's the one that keeps me out of trouble and makes sure that I don't have a scheduling conflict, that I didn't miss and forget to get something done, or forget about an email, or she does the schedule. And and it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but she really does everything. And I really appreciate her being there. And when you make it over to the school, I hope you get a chance to meet Kim too. Next slide, please. Okay, so, the way our task organization, of course, the commandant's department, we've got the commandant, then we've got 3 deputy commandants. And then under Doug Wright, we've got the senior leadership advisors and company leadership advisors. And then the nighttime shift, the NACOs, the night accountability control officers. And so, they're all concerned with cadet life, 24/7. I mean, with the exception of classroom time. So they're the ones that are making sure that, your sons and, your cadets are, again, safe and comfortable, that they have, that there aren't any medical issues, that they're, just looking after themselves. You know how, young men are at times where they don't always take care of themselves properly. Well, they ensure they do. And they do more than that. I mean, they mentor them. They work with the leadership, the cadet leadership. Now, the cadet leaders are the ones that actually, kind of run the barracks. So what we have is we have 3 different barracks that are going to be inhabited. So we have 4 companies and 3 barracks. So we have Bravo and band companies are in one of the barracks, in Bravo barracks. Then Charlie Company is in a separate barracks, and Echo is in a separate barracks. So each one of these barracks has, roughly 65, 70 cadets. And so each one of these barracks would have a cadet company commander and company first sergeant. They have an executive officer that also assists the command team. And then it's broken down by, they'll have different platoon leaders and platoon sergeants. And they'll run their platoons, and then from there it'll go down to squads, and you'll have squad leaders that may be, responsible for kind of keeping an eye on, 5 or 6 cadets. And so all of these cadet leaders have been handpicked, they've been interviewed, they've been vetted, by all the different departments across MMA. And, we put a lot of care and time into selecting, what we felt were going to be good leaders. Now, as you know, sometimes boys, may get overwhelmed, or may have issues, or maybe they have trouble in a class where their grades slip and they're no longer in good standing. We'll deal with that as it comes. We've got, we have rules and regulations to govern what happens, and we may have to suspend them or put them back, when they get their grades up, or depending on what the issue is. But we have a network of cadets to look after, the older cadet leaders to look after the younger ones or the newer ones. And these are still teenage boys, they're still high school students. And so that's where the company leadership advisors come in. They're there to mentor them, to give them guidance, to oversee, make sure that they're not, doing something improper, doing something that's, against regulation, and just make sure that they're doing the best job they can in developing them as leaders. One of the areas that sets us apart from, say, a public school is in a public school, there's not really any, student leadership. You might have the, student council, or, the student government, but it's not like, a military school where they're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they have to look after each other. And the cadet leaders are an integral part of making sure that their time here at MMA, is beneficial to each of the cadets, and that you don't have one that's infringing on another one, or that acting improperly or anything like that. So again, we have a senior company leadership advisor that's in charge of each barracks. And each one of those will have several CLAs, or company leadership advisors, depending on the population in that barracks. And then each night, just so they've got, again, some adult supervision. And if something doesn't arise, if there's an emergency or something happens, you've got a NACO, or a night accountability control officer, that's there to help. So next slide, please.
And Major Welander, I wanted add one thing too about what you were talking about with the cadet leaders. Something I've heard President Geraci say as well is, we have the use of positive peer pressure here. So one of the questions submitted beforehand was, how do we help cadets become self-driven? And I think what you were saying about the cadet leadership is definitely a key point there. Those cadet leaders set the example. They are showing them every day. They're sharing their experiences with the new cadets to help them to do that. Before we move on from the CLAs, would you talk just a little bit about what parents should expect as far as communication from them, and how
Yes.
that happens?
So the CLAs and the senior CLAs, they're always there to communicate with you if you have any questions, or if you have any concerns. Now, they do, and it's actually further on in my presentation, I'll get over kind of the frequency and, the regularity. They're required to, each, trying to think, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact frequency right now. It's, you remember that, Jennifer? It was, I think, well, I do believe it's later on in my presentation, so I apologize for that. But yes, not only do the CLAs have a requirement to talk to you, and give you updates on your cadet, but then also if there's incidentals and things happen, they're there, they'll let you know if there's any emergencies, if there's any, even if it's not an emergency, if there's something that happened with your cadet, or let's say it's even something that's not that critical, they did something, maybe they were in the wrong uniform, or they didn't make it up in time, and maybe they wind up, if they've done that, several times, and they lose their phone privilege, or they lose some other privilege, before they do something like that, they let you know ahead of time what's going on with your cadet. So, you're always being informed on what's going on with them and how they're doing. And I will say this too, the CLAs, I've seen a lot of their comments and the things and the extra time they put in, and some of the time with the boys that, not all the boys are the same. They don't play favorites, but that doesn't mean that one cadet doesn't need, maybe a little more guidance than another. And they're really good at discerning that and identifying it and working with that cadet. And when things like that happen too, they always let the parents know, how your cadet's doing and, maybe some issues they're having here adjusting, or maybe even some, victories and some ways that they've actually been progressing. So did that answer your question? I guess it probably didn't completely, because you wanted a frequency too. So
no. That actually that was what I was wanting to make sure that we shared, is kind of that larger role of what they can expect as far as interactions. So
okay, yeah. Next slide, please. So yes, so each, like I said, each barracks has a company of cadets in there, and you have the company commander, you have the first sergeant. Now, as much as possible, I like to have them down on the first floor near the CLA office. So there's easy communications. If a CLA sees something going on and something that needs to be addressed, instead of addressing it themselves, they can have the cadet leadership move in and address it and go through their chain of command. So we want them to get used to going, both directions in the chain of command. Of course, the cadet leaders, reaching down to the lower level leaders and working with the individual cadets, or the cadets reaching up to their first line leader if they have an issue. And so on the first floor, besides the company leadership, we have the middle school cadets. Now, this is, for the reason, because the middle school cadets, like I said, not everybody is at the same age and maturity level. And middle schoolers, believe it or not, sometimes they will get into more trouble or try to, they're still trying to figure themselves out and who they are. And so they do need a little more oversight than some of the older, more mature cadets. So they're put down on the first floor. Now, second floor, you'll notice on the slide, it is an increase in grade and age and maturity. They go up to a higher level in the barracks because they're further away from the CLAs, and they're further away from adult supervision, which doesn't mean they're further away from supervision, though, because again, the cadets are leading themselves. Part of their educational experience is that they get the opportunity to lead and learn to be leaders. And so, that middle schooler that year, if they stay there at MMA, ideally will be, a cadet leader later on as they get to be a junior and senior. Another group of cadets that maybe wind up on the first floor if there's some that we need to have closer by for observations, maybe they have a medical issue, or there could be other reasons too, but we may move somebody down there temporarily, or if it's a more chronic thing, and it's something that they're still allowed to be at the school, then they could be down on the first floor just so they could keep an eye on them and make sure that they're okay. So I guess one of the questions that was asked too was, when do cadets get their company assignments? And so when they arrive at MMA, they'll get their company assignments the first day. Now, if it's a returning student, we, as a general rule, will put them back in the company they were previously in that year. But for the new cadets, well, first off, so that for the cadet leadership, for the ones coming to the cadet cadre leadership camp, they'll arrive on August 1st and they'll get their company assignment. Well, they know their company assignments, but they'll get their room assignments then. Now, the next group of boys would be the new boys. New boys will arrive on August 8th, and they'll get their room assignments and their company assignments that first day. Now, when they first get there, one of the nice things is that we will just have finished Cadet Cadre Leadership Camp, and the Cadet Cadre leaders will be the ones that are helping the new boys as they arrive on campus, and as they don't know where to go or what to do or how they're supposed to be doing it, and they're there to assist them along the way. And cadet leaders, yeah, like I said, that we've got the leadership camp on the 1st, cadet cadre leadership camp. They'll help them acclimate, and they'll be there for all the new boys. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
And actually, if I can add as well, and sorry, I'm going the right way, on the company organization with the new cadets too. One thing that we also often get questions about are just moves that happen at the beginning of the year. And particularly with those new cadets, they're assigned, and I know a lot of parents then are, have questions about roommates and things like that, particularly during those first couple of weeks. It's really a time also where the commandant's team has a chance to assess who works well where, what strengths and weaknesses, where we may be able to balance cadets out. So in those first 2 weeks, you can expect to see some changes. So please know that that is common and expected as we are trying to set those cadets up for success and pair particularly the new cadets with the right roommates.
Okay, so speaking of which, it ties in right with what I want to talk about here, which is Maroon phase. So when a new boy arrives at MMA, I mean, regardless of how old they are, what grade they are in, they're trying to adapt to a new and very foreign environment. Instead of living at home, going to a public school or whatever they came from. Some of them, maybe coming from a foreign country. But again, everybody here, I don't think anybody is just, I doubt if anybody just came from another military school, possibly, but most of them, it's a big adjustment. And so for the first 8 to 9 weeks, like it says on the slide here, they'll be in something called Maroon phase, and that's new cadet training. Now, the beginning of that is where we separate all the new cadets out. When they arrive there, in the cadet leadership takes them, they'll set them up in a completely separate barracks from all the other cadets when the old boys arrive back. And so they'll be put in Delta barracks. So in Delta barracks, that's a time for the cadet leaders to be able to have a little closer one-on-one time with them when these new upcoming cadets aren't expected to know everything, but are expected to learn. When they learn the handbook and they learn how to wear a uniform and they learn what the ranks are and military customs and courtesies and what the expectations are. Because there's a lot to deal with. You now have a regimented schedule. You have, completely different clothing than they're used to wearing and rules for how to wear it. And so it's a lot to adjust to. And so, like it says here, they teach them what the baseline standards are, and they start working with them and giving them the information they need to succeed there. And so during this time, because a lot of the boys do have, hard time adjusting and hard time, maybe being homesick at that point, there's different things with Maroon phase that are different than being an old boy at MMA. So one of the big ones that they probably have more trouble than other things are no cell phone privileges during this period. Probably even more so than general leave, because we'll talk about general leave a bit more later, and cell phone privileges. But during Maroon phase, they're not allowed to have cell phones. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have communication with you. So they can get a hold of you by Zoom. They've got laptops. They can call on a CLA phone if they really need to. We encourage them to, we encourage you to, as much as possible, not to be reaching out to them and talking to them during that time. We found that what happens is they'll, if they are struggling, especially if it's something like being homesick, they call home and then just gets them more off track and more unfocused on what they're supposed to do here and focused on wanting to be home and being back with their friends and their parents. And, so, try to minimize that time with them. Now, if, I don't want you to feel like you don't have the opportunity to talk to them till you do. So now if a cadet is struggling during that time, there is a lot of support in place. Like I told you, we're working on, with these cadet leaders, trying to develop them and trying to teach them how to work with these new boys. They've all been new boys themselves. They understand what they're going through as they come in. So in a lot of ways, they can relate to them more than, even the CLAs can. So they're there for them. They can kind of walk them through it. If it's an experience they didn't have, one of the other, old boys, I'm sure, has had an experience similar to that. So, it's something where they can relate to them more. They can see that somebody that maybe had the same problems they had and succeeded at MMA and are now in the leadership. So their first line of support is the cadet leaders. The next lines of support is the CLAs, the company leadership advisors. And again, they have a lot of experience. Many of them have, multiple years of being here and working with cadets. And they have other resources to help them too, if it's something that they're not familiar with. And so, they're there to work with the cadets too. And if it's something that, again, they're having trouble with, we have the CLA or the senior CLAs. We have the deputy commandants, and, myself, if I feel the need to be involved, of course, I want them to get used to the chain of command, but, I'm there for the cadets too. And I make sure that I'm visible, that I'm there in the mornings when they get up, when they're down there eating breakfast or lunch, that they see me, that they get used to seeing me, that they get used to, talking to me and telling me good morning or good afternoon. And I usually ask them how they're doing. Sometimes you can see on their face that something's wrong. And so we have a lot of oversight there now. Outside of that, in my department, the academic department too, the academic dean and everybody, all the teachers at the school, they're very good at working with their cadets. I guess the next person over in academics would be their academic advisor. And their academic advisor works with them on a daily basis. They see them every morning, every afternoon. And, they're very likely to also notice if there's any issue with your cadet. And, we can communicate back and forth between the different departments. We're good at making sure that if we see something that we're concerned about, that we talk to, academics, or they talk to us about it. So there's a lot of support there, and the staff is proactive. We don't just wait for the cadet to come up and say, hey, I'm having an issue. Sometimes we may just tell by the look on their face or that they're acting up, that they're getting, maybe volatile or confrontational. And so there's a lot of ways that, kids react to their situation, and the CLAs have enough experience where they've all observed that. And even, the deputy commandants, everybody has experience. Bill, he's done, years and years of seeing cadets at Valley Forge and soon to be at MMA. He can read these cadets too and know what they're going through. We also have our international students. Now, you would think that, say, a student from Mongolia that's just showing up to the United States and they don't speak English and they're just, feels like they're just dumped off here in a foreign land, which I guess in a way they just were, although that's not a real positive way of putting it. How are they going to handle this, and how are we going to deal with that? And that, on the surface, that seems a bit overwhelming. But we have students from all over the world, from Mexico, Mongolia, China, Vietnam, Brazil, and I could go on and on, different African countries. And we have a lot of students that start here with very limited English. And what we do is we will team them up with, a student from, that speaks their native language, and they're able to, kind of, be there to translate for them, to help them some with their conversational English, and to assist them. And surprisingly enough, because I can barely speak English, much less another language, these kids do remarkably well, and they adjust very quickly. So we have things like our ELL program, also where we have teachers that work with them too and help them acclimate. But then, of course, probably just as important, or maybe more important, is just the other cadets that can help them through it. Next slide, please. Okay, gold phase. So we talked about maroon phase. So maroon phase, there's a lot of restrictions on the new cadets. And it's for a period of time, and then as we go through the slides, I'll talk about how they, end maroon phase and how they accomplish being, a full cadet and having full cadet status at MMA. So the returning cadets, we have old boys that have been there and are coming back. And so this August, when the old boys come back, and they've been there, they understand MMA, they understand cadet life. Well, they've been home for a few months. They've had a chance to sleep in every morning or not make their bed and not study and, get back to more like being a teenager. And gold phase is designed where it's a shorter period than maroon phase, but it's another period for the old boys to acclimate and get back on track and, back kind of in the rhythm of being at MMA. And so when they come back, they will have all the restrictions of maroon phase initially, and they'll have to earn their rights back to be, at full status and to get off of gold status. And again, this isn't a punishment. This is something for them to, again, just get acclimated to the school. Next slide, please. Okay, to continue with gold phase, again, I said it was just like maroon phase. General leave is not authorized. That's in line with what's going on in maroon phase. No cell phone privileges, including any of the privileges they have as Delta Phi, Honor Society, or any of the senior privileges. So I kind of went over it, but they're back basically at maroon phase. And, how long is it? Well, here it says it's up to me. And so I'm going to kind of make observations. I prefer not to be very long, but it depends how well the cadet leaders, accept their responsibilities and how long the returning cadets takes them to get back on track and get back into a lifestyle of being at MMA. Next slide, please. Okay, cell phone policy. So I'm old enough to not know how to deal with cell phones in my own experience being in high school. That was not a thing back when I went to high school. So cell phones at any school can be an issue. And so, probably even more so at MMA or at any kind of a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week military school. So the cell phone policy, first off, and this may seem kind of odd, but they only get one cell phone. Now, if you're wondering about that, so there's restrictions on cell phones when you can have them. So, kids are pretty smart and they know how to work around the system, right? And so if I was a kid, when I go over to Walmart, when I get, leave and I get to go over there and I need to buy toiletries or other things, why not pick up a cheap burner phone while I'm there too? And then I can have, they don't know that they have my cell phone put away, but I have another phone. So believe it or not, that's been a problem in the past with different cadets. And so they're not allowed to have more than one cell phone or, one smartwatch and no other smart devices. And now they're continually making new smart devices. For instance, they have smart glasses. And so they can't have smart glasses. There's no reason for it. They don't need to have it for their educational experience. And, it's a little harder to monitor. So if they're found with those are contraband and they're going to be confiscated and, will be given back to them so they can bring them home, but they won't be able to have them on campus. Now, phone numbers and current passcodes, they must be provided to the commandant's office. That's a condition for having a phone. If they want to have one at all, we have to have that. Now, that's for, again, the cadet safety, it's for monitoring discipline at the school. there's a lot of things that you can do with a cell phone. You can video, you can take pictures. There may be allegations, if one cadet's getting out of line or another, it could be text messages or other things. And so, a lot of times if we have to investigate or have to look into something, we need access to the cadets' phones. Now, that doesn't mean that we just grab them all the time for entertainment value. If we're going to look at their phone and get into it, we will notify you first. So you will know about this. There are conditions to doing this. So it's only as needed. And again, like I say, this is for, protection of the cadets. So we have to have the passcodes. Every cadet has to have a passcode on their phone too. We don't want it where another cadet can get into their phone and then possibly do some things nefariously that, maybe your cadet would be blamed for because it's on their phone. So it's important that they have a passcode and that they don't share it with other cadets. Now, access to cell phones using passcodes by staff or faculty, like I said, that's only going to be done with your knowledge. We're not going to just go in there randomly, so you'll know anytime we do that. And then cadets in good standing, and again, I haven't really gone into what good standing is, but it's academics and athletics and different things. But cadets in good standing will have access to their phones starting on Friday evenings after dinner. Phones will be turned in on Sunday evenings prior to Vespers. So what that means is during the school week, when your cadets are going to school and taking classes, they do not have access to their cell phones. And so it's not a distraction, and they can concentrate more on their studies and their classes. They do get them over the weekend, and a lot of that is that gives them an opportunity to reach out to you and to talk to you, so they're not restricted from telling you how things are going, telling you about any accomplishments they have, and being able to just communicate with you and family and friends. So that's what that means. They just get their phones on the weekends. That's all I have on that slide too. Jennifer, is there something you wanted to add?
Yes, I have a question. Well, a couple of questions. If you could just touch on from a social media standpoint, if there's any limitations on cadets on their computers, on their school computers. And then so I guess if you want to answer that one first.
Yes, and again, if you want more details on some of the things I'm going to go over, this is all in the handbook, the cadet handbook. But yes, social media, we're not too restrictive about it, but there obviously things like, vulgarity, pornography, anything having improper as far as hate speech. There's conditions, or there's things that we don't allow. There's also things like if it's saying things against or that may be damaging to MMA or other cadets, of course, we don't want them to infringe on the other cadets' rights or their quality of life at the school. So those are just a few of the things, but yes, there are guidelines for any social media, and it's all laid out in the cadet handbook.
Yeah. And if a parent does want a more restrictive laptop for their cadets, they can contact the commandant's office, who will work with the IT to take care of that as well.
Yeah.
I will add to something that you'll hear President Geraci say: are boys have responsibility as well. The cadets have responsibility. So we are not holding their hands the entire time they're here. We're trying to teach them to make healthy choices and provide those guidelines and standards that we expect them to uphold. And I think within that, as Major Welander kind of pointed out some of those points with social media, we want to teach them how to be responsible and respectful in all areas. So
yes, and things like cell phones, they're a privilege, not a right. And we do use, cell phone access is, a disciplinary tool when necessary. Now, even if it's not for disciplinary purposes, if you would prefer that your cadet not have as much access to their cell phone as others, you can request that yourself. and you can limit their time, and we'll abide by that. Maybe you don't want them to have it all weekend. Maybe you want them to study on Saturday and they can talk on Sunday, or maybe you're more concerned, about their church and their spiritual well-being on Sunday and you want them to talk on Saturday, or maybe, but it's up to you as far as getting any, if you want further restrictions on their cell phone, or like Jennifer was saying, maybe some of their access on their laptop and what they can get to. We'll continue with cell phone policy. So violations of the policy results in a loss of weekend cell phone privileges for the following periods. So they get their first offense. Their first offense, they lose their privilege for 3 consecutive weekends. Now it also mentions like if they have any additional senior privileges or Delta Phi privileges, those would go for 8 weeks. But their cell phone privileges for 3 weeks. Now they get a second offense. Now this is where it probably gets to even hurt more for them. It's 16 weeks. That's a long time for a teenager or for a young boy to not have a cell phone. Now, unfortunately, if they're chronic offenders and they have a third offense, it's for the rest of the academic year. So, I mean, there are, what they're going to see is serious consequences if they do not conform and follow the rules. For me, I think that might be a privilege to lose my cell phone for the rest of the academic year, but the kids aren't going to feel that way. So, again, if they lose their cell phone privilege, we're going to let you know too. You'll be aware of this. This is some of the communications that the CLAs will be making with you. Now, if for some reason we have a cadet that's combative and refuses to give up or surrender their cell phone when it's requested, they immediately lose their privilege for the rest of the academic year. So there's some real incentives for them to comply and to listen. Now, if you do want to restrict their computers or their cell phone privileges, your first point of contact is also always your CLAs. So talk to them first, and then they can work it out and get that arranged for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of times people ask, when can I see my boy again? When can I see my cadet? And so there's, if you wanted to come here every time, it's probably going to be about 11 times over the year. And so the first thing that comes on the calendar that's that we're inviting the parents to come to is homecoming. So this year homecoming is September 26th to the 28th. And so we're going to go over all the different, parent events that we have. We have other ones where the kids or the cadets have time to go out on their own that aren't actually times, let's say for their birthday. The birthday is time for them to be with other cadets or, to get some time, but it's not a time for the parents to come. So homecoming is the first one. And I'm going to do a quick run through all of them. And then as we get to the page that talks about this, we'll talk about it in more detail. So in the fall, you have homecoming, and that's the 26th to the 28th September. Next thing is Fall Family Weekend. And if you wanted to come to one thing for the Fall Family Weekend's probably the one where you want to come to if you can only do one, because the Fall Family Weekend, 17th through the 19th of October, and there's just a lot going on there. If you want to, I can come back to tell you what. Instead of going through all of them, go ahead and go back to Crucible and we'll talk about that. And I'll go over the other ones afterwards. Okay, Jennifer?
Yes, and I will. We will also be sharing what to expect information with all of our new parents that will go into detail on some of these too. So. Okay,
thanks. So we talked about Maroon phase. And, there's a lot of incentive and reason why these kids are going to want to get off of Maroon phase. They want to be a full cadet. They want to be, part of the group with everybody else. They want to get their phone privileges back. They want, they want to be able to, go on general leave and things like that. And so part of their journey for getting off Maroon phase is to endure the Crucible. And the Crucible, it's a physical event. It's an all-day event, and it actually starts kind of the night before. But, you know, that morning of the Crucible, they get up early in the morning and they go out, and immediately they go to the football field, and we have, you know, where they'll compete in different events. They'll do push-ups, and they'll do they're not sit-ups. They'll do a 1 mile run. And throughout the day, you know, and this is a picture of one of the Crucibles, we have obstacles on the back campus, and they'll go through these different obstacles, and then they'll have to face these different challenges, and they'll have to carry a heavy litter like it's got like a patient on it or an injured person on it. And they'll have to go through different terrain, and it's really a challenge. It's you know, it's difficult, but it's accomplishable. And they aren't ever told when the Crucible ends. They're just told, then here's your next, you know, they finish that event. Okay, here's your next event. And they do that one. Okay, well, here's your next event. And it continues, and they start wondering if there's ever an end to this day. And when it finally does end, they wind up over back by the field house, and there's an ice cream social for them, and they get to celebrate their accomplishment. And, you know, Crucible, it's a rite of passage for being a cadet. And it's a great honor, and it leads to what the next slide's going to have is the passing through ceremony. So the passing through ceremony, you can see a parent here doing the hat pinning. And so up until this time, while they're on Maroon phase, they're wearing, you know, Maroon shoulder boards for their rank. They don't have a cadet rank. They don't have any hat brass on their hat. And so this is a big deal when the family's there, and the family can go and they can pin the hat brass on the hat themselves. And if you're able to make it to this, you know, you'll see the pride that they have in having earned that and letting their parents or guardians know this. Now, we do have some cadets, you know, if you're living in Mongolia or China or somewhere, and you just can't make it out here as often as you'd like, you know, what they'll usually do is those cadets, they'll find a cadet leader that they have respect for, and they'll have that cadet leader or maybe a teacher or a CLA or an adult at the school pin their hat brass on for them. So we don't leave them out either, and they're always part of the ceremony. And so this is their welcome to the Cadet Corps, is really the passing through ceremony. Now that's the first, well, that's another family weekend when you can come. Now the next one, well, this is all part of the fall family weekend. You've got October, it's still 17th through the 19th. So other things we've got going on is you've got parent-teacher conferences that weekend. You can visit classes if you like. There's also not just parent-teacher conferences, but think about this, you know, it's not a public school where they come home each night. So you also have CLA conferences, and you'll meet with the CLAs, and they'll tell you how they're doing in barracks life and how they're getting along with the other cadets. So there's that. Of course, we already talked about the passing through ceremony itself. There is a review and senior ring ceremony, and that's another big deal for the seniors. So they get their senior ring from MMA, and except for the date, you know, the graduation date on the rings, these rings haven't changed since they've been, you know, since they started having rings in MMA. So if you look at an old one, you know, one that's, you know, from the 50s or the 40s or whatever, it's going to look nearly identical to the one that, you know, the seniors that we have today wear. That we also do things like a Fusilier drill team demonstration, so the parents can watch that. We do room and uniform inspections. And then there's a senior ring dinner and dance, which go ahead and go to the next page.
Sorry, and I will, and for our senior parents, we will send information out this fall regarding senior rings. And if you would like to purchase one, it really is a special honor and moment for those senior cadets.
So this is the ball at the end of the, you know, the senior ring ball. And so it's kind of the culmination of this weekend. So
and
you
all
can see,
cadets can attend with their families too. I say all cadets can attend with their families too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, it's a great experience if you had a chance to do that. So another time when the cadets have time to be off campus, we're going to talk about open weekends, and these are a little different. So open weekends are only for cadets in good standing. And again, like I said before, I'll get through the details, but it has to do with their academics, their sports, their conduct, whatnot, but they have to be in good standing, and they may be checked out by their guardian to go home. So any of the open weekends, you can check out your cadet. Open weekends are published on the school calendar. I believe you send out emails too, don't you, Jennifer? Okay, so you'll send out emails, so you'll be notified ahead of time. Now, it can't conflict with any school commitments or any varsity events that your cadet may be involved in. So there's possibility that there may be 1 or 2 open weekends that you can't see your cadet. But things to remember. So there's big event weekends like alumni, homecoming, fall family weekend, Valentine's Day weekend, Mother's Day, spring family weekends. All those are big events and big weekends, and where you may be on campus and you may see your cadet, it's not an open weekend. And so that's a little different. Now, the things to remember with an open weekend. Open weekends are intended for cadets and family members. Some of those other big events are intended where you can see your cadet and you can actually spend time with them on campus, but you can't take them off campus, if that makes sense. Now, check-in and check-out procedures. There's guidelines for that. Mostly, you need to check in with their CLA, their company leadership advisor. Let them know, who you are, who your cadet is. When you're signing them out, they'll let you know when you have to have them back too. Now, sometimes we've had things like we've had where, a cadet has a buddy and this one cadet's parents are here and the other ones aren't. And so he'll want his buddy, to go with him. Now, you can't just sign out the other cadet. So especially if it's something like that, plan ahead with these things. And if that's something they want to do, their parent or guardian has to get permission, written permission, or in-person permission. So again, with these, just try to plan ahead and try to, be proactive. You sign them out with the CLA barracks. It has to be their CLA. And, make sure you have them back on time, and they'll let you know what time you have to have them back. Next slide, please. Furloughs. Okay, so furloughs, you've got, now furloughs are longer periods when you're able to, when your cadet's able to go home. And so, some of the longer ones are like Christmas break or spring break, but there's also Thanksgiving. So scheduled furloughs are Thanksgiving, spring break, Christmas break. Now, other types of cadets or breaks that aren't scheduled would be things like if there's an emergency furlough, and that might be, something happens at home, hopefully nothing, bad happens, but, sometimes there's a thing that, where the cadet needs to come home and wants to see somebody or something comes up, an illness, injury. So there are emergency furloughs, and those can be coordinated, through the CLA and the Commandant's office. The other type of furlough is a college furlough. And of course, we recommend college furloughs. We want these young men to, get to visit different colleges that they might want to go to. So with the college furloughs, they can have 3 college furloughs a year. Now, and like it says here, no more than 5 days total. Now, we don't want to restrict them on how many colleges they can see, but eventually it's starting to cut into their class time and adversely affect them. Let's see. Now, if for some reason, if you don't have authorization and you decide you just can't let your cadet go home on that day and you must see them longer, there is a fee for that. So if it's unauthorized. Now, if it's authorized, there's no fee. But if it's unauthorized and they're just not showing back up, of course, first we're going to check because we're concerned with, something might happen to them. But at that point, there is a fee for late return.
And if I can, I did share in the chat a link to the important dates page on the website. So all of those dates that Major Welander just went through are there, so you can refer to it anytime. Regarding that early departure, late arrival fee, because we've got that involves extra time on our staff to coordinate to make sure that we are managing any of those. That's why that fee is in place as well. It's very important for any furloughs to make sure that you fill out a furlough form. We've sent out information. We'll be sending out a link again for an arrival form. It's on the website. We want to make sure that we know how every cadet is arriving to the academy. And then for the spring furloughs, Christmas, winter furloughs, things like that, when they are departing, especially if they're flying home, we need to be able to coordinate that as well. So you'll see email reminders coming out on those to make sure that you fill those out. And one note too, we do have this question that's asked: on open weekends, we do not provide transportation to the airport. So that is not, we only provide transportation for those official furloughs.
So the next slide is going to go over good standing. You've heard me say that a few times. So I'll give you a brief rundown on what I mean by good standing. So first off, I told you it's academic. So they need a minimum GPA of 2.0 along with a C grade or higher in deportment. Now, we haven't really talked about tours yet, but so would be something, some people might think of them as demerits. So when you have, you got into some kind of trouble, you didn't get up on time, your uniform's a mess, your room's not clean, for whatever reason, you can be awarded tours. And to be in good standing, you cannot have more than 12 tours, and you can't be on X tours. Now, X tours is an excessive amount of tours without getting into the details, but that's a lot of tours if you're on X tours. So, by then there's a chronic problem. Now, you also can't be on OSS or weekend restriction. You have to be making progress on your community service hours, and we'll talk about that. So again, part of the educational experience in MMA is for these young men to be good citizens and contribute to the community. And so one way we teach that is they're required to do a certain amount of community service each semester. And so they do 8 hours each semester each year as a minimum. A lot of them do quite a bit more community service than that. So if they're not making progress and they're not getting the community service hours completed, they're not in good standing. Now, to be clear on this too, we give them scheduled time. We give them a full day each semester to do community service hours. So it's not hard for them to get that done. They have to be actively participating in all scheduled physical fitness events as well as assigned athletics. And this can be, any one of the sports teams, or if they're not on one of the sports teams too, it could mean Commandant PT. But, again, part of the 360 experience at MMA is physical fitness. And each day, the cadets are all going to do some kind of physical activity too. And again, back to academics, they can't have any failing grades at all. So that's good standing. Next slide, please. Now, cadets are not in good standing. They're not going to be able to go on general leave. And so again, these are incentives for them to do this. They're not going to be able to go into town if it's general leave. Now, if they're a cadet leader, or even if they're not a cadet leader, when it comes to promotion time, if they were otherwise eligible for a promotion, they'll be denied that promotion. And as I stated before, sometimes cell phones are a good incentive to get teenagers back on track to want to get into good standing. Next slide, please. So I did mention general leave in the previous slide. So most weeks they get general leave, which is over the weekends. They get 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Saturdays and 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Sundays. Now, this isn't guaranteed. There may be times when we have to have them practice drill or practice for events coming up. If they have other obligations, if they're on one of the sports teams or the drill team or, one of the other, things like that, they may not have general leave. Next slide, please. So if they do go on general leave, they have to have a battle buddy. And what I mean by a battle buddy is they have to be in groups of at least 2. They're not going to be walking around town themselves. Now, that's not that we don't necessarily trust them. In fact, if anything, we seem to get very good feedback from the citizens of Mexico, where they tell us how polite they are and how well-mannered and how much they enjoy seeing them go into town. But what if something happened? What if they slipped and hurt themselves? What if somebody attacked them? What if they got hit by a car? There's any number of things. And so we want them to have a battle buddy where somebody's always there with them to help them if they need. Cadets, they have to be in good standing, like we said, academics, conduct, athletics, and no cadet is authorized to leave the city of Mexico. And so they can't go and get a taxi or an Uber or something and go to Kingdom City or Columbia or St. Louis or Kansas City. They have to stay in Mexico. Next slide, please.
And to touch on just a couple of questions that were raised in the chat that's important so we make sure everybody understands. Regarding the college furloughs, those are only for juniors and seniors. So please do understand that. And since deportment is something that is also unique to military schools, you're not going to find in other educational settings. In the parent section of the website, there's a frequently asked questions section, and you can find some good information on what deportment is to help you understand that as well.
So general leave. Again, we don't want this to be confused with an open weekend. Open weekend, you're signing your cadet out, and you're going somewhere, maybe doing something with them. Could be bringing them home. You could be just doing something with them in Mexico around the area. General leave is time for the cadets. It's time for them to, if they need to purchase something into town, if they want to spend time with their buddies. General leave is not a time when you can go and sign your cadet out. That's for them. And, I know we said every weekend or most weekends, or at least some weekends, there's times that things come up and changes that have to be made, and, we adjust when we have to. So your young man might tell you that he's got general leave next weekend and then tell you later that he doesn't, and he might be disappointed or something, but there's usually a good reason for that. We don't just take it away. Next slide. Okay, packages and mail. Of course, you want to send care packages to cadets, and they appreciate getting them. It's always good, to know that you got something in the mail. And so now every cadet has a mailbox. And the next slide is going to show you a picture of it so you can kind of see them. But, there you go. You can kind of see they're approximately about 12 inches by 12 inches by 18. Now, if they have a package that fits in the mailbox, it's going in the mailbox. If they have a package that doesn't fit in there, the CLAs will get the package to the cadet. Now, understand that we get, with as many cadets as we have, that there's a lot of packages that come in. There's a lot of packages for cadets. That same location where they come in, packages come in for different departments in the school too. So, the cadets have everything they need to live here. They've got food, they've got other clothing. Extra things are going to take up space in their room. Extra things are going to make it harder to pass their inspections. If it's food and things, it's possible that they're going to leave them out, and we may have insects or other critters that are hungry and want to get at them. So I would ask that you try to restrict these. I understand you want to, again, you want to have care packages, you want to give them a treat. Just be cognizant of not sending them too many packages, and not too many snacks and things too. Part of the physical aspects of being in MMA is, eating well and being physically fit, and, not as much snacking and not as much availability of that. Now, they all have their mailbox. Again, I talked about how they're getting their packages. Now, every evening on weekdays, they have the opportunity to go and check their mail. Now, we do have reserve the right to be able to search their packages to make sure that there's not contraband coming in. And besides that, talking about food again. Now, one way that we try to have less critters and things get in there if they do have some snack food is we give them a pretty much like a Tupperware container that's 9 by 11 by 3 that they can put their snacks in. So don't send them something that's not going to fit in that container. Don't send them, their biggest favorite box of cereal, the mega box that's like this big of, sugar puffs or something. And, because then they're going to have no place to put it that's really safe. So again, we're trying to keep everybody healthy, and not just with their own bodies, but making sure that things aren't crawling into the room and crawling in bed with their roommate either. Next slide, please. And we showed you that. So yeah, so this is the package room. This is where mail delivery comes in. And you can see the back of the mailboxes in the background. And so this looks like a busy day around Christmas, doesn't it? Well, unfortunately, it's not. This is an average day. And there's people that have to work in there and they have to issue uniforms and other things. And that's where our quartermaster store is. And so that's what I mean by you got to really watch how much you send, because it can get to be an issue. Next slide, please.
And if you ever want to reference and look back to make sure the guidelines and recommendations in that communications archive online, that initial information that we send out, there's a link that explains that, and that we do ask that you limit to one small package, no more than every 2 weeks, please.
Okay, so we have certain authorized delivery services. And part of the reason for this is, again, to inhibit contraband or other things, inappropriate things coming in or onto campus. So these are the only services that are allowed to have things delivered. Like say if it was, on a special occasion and you wanted to have food sent to your cadet, you want them to have a special meal, you're not going to use something like DoorDash. This is part of what I'm getting at. But if you look here, of course, the United States Postal Service, but UPS, FedEx, DHL, Amazon. No other, even some that you might think like Walmart, they're not allowed. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next slide. Okay, so one problem we have with packages is sometimes if you got an address label or an address written on there where it gets torn off or part of it missing or just hard to read. And so we try to, I guess, simplify this some. Instead of putting Missouri Military Academy, you put MMA, like I wish we could do on my email address. But my email address is Missouri Military Academy. So at least you don't have to do that when you're mailing them something. So you put their last name and put your first name, or you can put a first initial, because keep in mind, we have multiple cadets with the same last name. Even if it's a strange name, you'd be surprised. And so you put their last name, their first name or first initial. You can put MMA, but don't put Missouri Military Academy. Just put MMA, or don't put it at all and just put the street address. Right? Easier, not longer. 204 North Grand Street's pretty easy address. So, there's an example there. And this will help your packages get there in a more timely manner and make sure that they're more likely to arrive and not be returned. Next. Okay, we talked about birthdays a little bit. So we do observe the cadets' birthdays. So we do a monthly birthday party, and what we do is we celebrate, say, for all the month of August, all the cadets that have a birthday in August, and we do a pizza party. And so this is coordinated with the parents committee, and only cadets with birthdays that month can attend. It's not for everybody. It's just for the birthday boys. Now, as far as individual birthday recognition, now you can arrange to send something to them. You could send a small pizza, a cake, something. You could give them a treat. I'm not. I mentioned DoorDash. you know, there's ways to get them something, but on their birthday, so they get something from you, but it's not going to be like, I'm going to send something to their whole, you know, their whole barracks and have this big party for them. So we can't do that. And when you do send something for their birthday, talk to the CLAs and make arrangements. They can tell you the proper way to do that. So we're not getting something done the wrong way and then we have to return it or can't accept it. Okay. Because we don't want them being disappointed where they're expecting something and then all of a sudden they don't get it. Next slide, please. Okay, health and safety. Health and safety is a big concern. Now, if you visited the school, you've seen we have a wonderful clinic there, and we've got, you know, nurses on staff, and we've got medical personnel there. And so we have a lot of resources that have to do with health and safety. So first, you know, sometimes boy wakes up in the morning, doesn't feel good, you know, for whatever reason. So first off, he needs to let people know, you know, if it's a beginning of the day, he could let his CLA know. You know, if it's during the school day, he could let, you know, faculty know. But, you know, the cadet has an opportunity to sign up for sick call if they're not feeling well. Now, if it's something that's more severe, something that we would, you know, would constitute an emergency, you know, of course they have the, you know, we want them to be seen right away and they wouldn't have to wait for a sick call. But if it's not emergency, you know, the health center, they'll get to them, you know, it may not be right that second, but they'll get to them and make sure that they're treated. Next slide, please. And another one for health and safety. Now, there are times something happens, you know, sports and things, you know, they're inherently dangerous, and sometimes you can have a sprain or a break. And so something like that, you know, we have health centers around the area. You know, we'll contact you, of course, and we'll get permission, and we'll let you know what's going on, and then we'll get them treated by, you know, health professionals, you know, if not in Mexico and Colombia. And then, of course, you know, there's our contact information if you need to get a hold of us for anything like that. Now, I'm kind of long-winded. I think this was supposed to be an hour, and I went about 20 minutes over. I'm going to blame Bill, even though he spoke for probably like 5 minutes. But I appreciate you getting on this call. Yeah, I thank you for your time. I know time is, you know, a precious commodity these days. And so I appreciate that you're concerned about your cadet and their well-being and trying to be more familiar with the school. And we just have staff here that, you know, if you have any questions or you need anything, that we're here to, you know, we're here for you. So I'll turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And as we close, do want to just emphasize the importance of good communication and that this is a partnership with you. So if you have any questions at all, please contact our Commandant staff, if it's academic related, the teachers, especially if you hear something that you are not sure about. So if your cadet complains about something that you are concerned about, particularly for new cadets as they're getting acclimated, some of them may not want to be here. They may get homesick. And so if they say something, you know, it is common sometimes for those cadets to want to try to go home. So if you hear something, please do contact us. We always take everything seriously if it's raised to us as a concern, and conduct any investigations that are needed. We take proactive stance through all of that. We want to make sure that we maintain a healthy environment. We also want to make sure that we support cadets through being uncomfortable with those first few days. And so that may mean that if we need to find out more information, find out what's going on, to make sure that we reassure you and can talk to the cadet as well to make sure everyone understands what we're doing here and why. So, Major Welander, do you have anything to add to that? Sorry, it didn't hit unmute.
Okay, there. Now you can hear me. So again, I hope we covered most of your questions. I know things are going to come up during the year though, and you know, maybe either things we didn't cover, things that we covered and you know you forgot or can't think of what they are, or maybe things that just don't seem like they're covered in a handbook or through this conversation. So yeah, communication is the key. And the CLAs, you know, I didn't actually give you an answer to that frequency, but if anything, you know, they're probably going to contact you more than you're expecting. They do have regular contact with each parent to let you know how, you know, and also through faculty, your faculty, you know, they give you, you know, will send out usually through email, but it could be through telephone or other ways, but they'll let you know how your cadet's doing academically. So you're going to be getting plenty of information, you know, through academics, through Commandant's department, through athletics, you know, but through the different departments to let you know how your cadet's doing. So, you know, if you're not getting information, let us, you know, let somebody know, and, you know, we'll get in touch with you. So thank you again.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you soon.